can just join. So Juliette will be conducting this meeting. I'm just greeting everyone. So there will be two parts. Mirna, who is also a comrade in Lebanon, and I will talk about the situation here. I think we'll need like 10 minutes each, and then we can just open the discussion. So Mirna, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, sure. Hello. I will introduce myself very quickly first. My name is Mirna Chehadeh. I live in Beirut. I've been what do I do for a living is I've been working with my brother organizing summer camps for kids. It's been since 2017. I have two kids myself, 10 and 14 years old. And I am a member of a political party in Lebanon. And it is the deteriorating situation in Lebanon that made me join politics and let me study also political science recently. So that's quickly about me. And I'll be sharing now the screen with you to show you just a little bit how things are going recently, the situation on the ground in Beirut. So let me just do this. Can you see my screen? Or not yet? Screen. Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I would like to share my location first to show you on the map. That's the map of Beirut City, the coastal highway. The green is the coastal Lebanese highway. The upper red point where is written Mirna is where I am located. And there's a point of the Beirut airport. And next to it, if you can see the stripy red is the nearest bombing, the bombing that is going on in Beirut right now. That is where things are located. So I just wanted to show you this on the map. Okay. Now, to explain, to give a better idea of the current situation and how heavy it is, I will have to mention that Lebanon have been enduring an economical crisis for the past 4 years now, and a state failure. And all the public sector's employees are getting around $100 or $150 per month. There's no social security functioning, no public school functioning at the time being. It's been going on, like I said, 4 years, 5 years now. A year ago, we got ourselves engaged in the war on Gaza. This brought back again the fight over the internal fight over the Hezbollah army, and that nobody, let's say, asked the Hezbollah to join the war, and Lebanon cannot take it because of the economical collapse. And 1 month ago, Israel announced a war on Lebanon to eradicate Hezbollah, attacking Lebanon south and Beirut and Bekaa, killing civilians in the same way they did to Gaza, forcing the displacement of 1 million persons, mostly Shia, actually, because if you know that Lebanon is really sectarian, is divided by so mostly of the displaced person are Shia, and that's 20% of our population. we're 4 million, 5 million. These people are leaving their schools, their home behind, and taking shelters in public schools and on the streets. No emergency plans whatsoever. And the displaced now are facing enormous challenges. One of them is to be welcomed by the other 20% of Christians, the right wing here, considered right wing in Lebanon. So, and here, if you can just understand the picture, there's a fear of civil war looming behind all this. And the bet now is on who would last longer on the ground. Is it Hezbollah or Israel in the south? Now, on the meantime, where I live, there's a public school next to me, and we went with a comrade in that political party, in my political party. We went to check up on the displaced person, and we saw that NGOs, local and foreigners, NGOs, are taking care of all the necessities in the meantime. So we started to work with the kids, doing some educational activities, because that is what was missing. We have 50 kids in that school. So we have managed to make a program to give them some readings and science and some activities. And I would like here to show you maybe some of the activities that we're doing on the ground with displaced persons. Sorry. We have made some artistic activities. If you can see the pictures here, we have done some paintings on t-shirts. We have done also some readings in Arabic. We have made some beading work in the school. Now we are struggling to get a room in that school because it will start to rain and we don't know where we can just continue to work with these kids. Let me show you here also the little hands working. We have made some embroidery.
That's sweet.
I know it's I hope it's not really out of the topic, but I would like to show you that here's some outdoor activity with it. It's all outdoor anyway, but it's like a sports activity. And yesterday we have managed to get them this oven with the gas so they can make manouche, this bread, Lebanese bread, to top with the za'atar thyme. And here's a woman working, waiting for the dough so they can do it. We did some manouche. Here are the kids. Some of the kids, very cute kids. I like them all. And here's Ali. He's from Nabatiye. He's a very smart boy. Well, that's it. That's what I just wanted to show that is happening for the past 2-3 weeks, let's say. So thank you for listening. I will stop screen sharing, and if you have anything to ask, I'll be here. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll continue. So I'd just like to give some context. When we think of Lebanon and Palestine, it might seem obvious what they are, but it's actually not that obvious. Like, what is Lebanon and what is Palestine? Most people would say that like Palestine is the country that's being occupied by Israel today, and Lebanon is the country that's right on top of it. This is true today, but it wasn't true that long ago. Something we often forget is that the borders today are actually recent borders. They were imposed by the British, French, and Zionist colonists And historically, it wasn't the case. Like today's Lebanon is very different from historical Lebanon. Today's Palestine is very different from historical Palestine. For example, I'm sure you know the capital of Lebanon, Beirut. So Beirut was not part of Lebanon historically. On the other hand, the upper half of Palestine, including cities that you've probably heard of, Raqqa or Acre, Nablus, and others, were a part of Beirut. There was actually a state called Beirut that included northern Palestine. The house I used to live in South Lebanon a few years ago was historically part of Palestine as well. So yeah, so the Zionist attack on or aggression on Palestine in 1948 and the colonization of Palestine as something separate from Lebanon is actually very novel. At the moment, at the time, they actually separated the two to be able to settle one without affecting the other. And at the same time, they have never let down on attacking Lebanon. This includes, I could say, two kinds of attack. The first is military, like what's happening right now. So even in 1948, the Nakba extended to what was then Lebanon and what is today Lebanon. It included attacks over the years, and it also includes different kinds of attacks which are politicizing identities in Lebanon. So, for example, they gave weapons to Druze Lebanese so they could fight against Christian Lebanese, and weapons to Christian Lebanese so they could fight against Druze Lebanese. And their message was always, you Druze should have a Druze state, and you Christians should have a Christian state. This is actually how Zionism perceives societies. It perceives societies as sectarian tribes. And when there is a state for Druze and a state for Christians and a state for Sunni and a state for Shia, then it legitimizes, at least in appearance, the concept of having a state exclusive to Jews. So this is kind of why Zionism is, even besides the military aspect, it is a danger to Lebanese society. It's even a danger to societies worldwide. For example, after the what happened in Amsterdam, there was Avigdor Lieberman, former Israeli ministers who said he tweeted that Jews in Europe, notice he said Jews in Europe and not European Jews, or not, sorry, not Jewish Europeans. He said their home is Israel, so they should go home. So this concept of viewing societies as sects and tribes, it's a danger to the whole world, and this is where Lebanon falls into the picture. So I'll also share my screen. Can you see my screen? Yes. Okay. So these are pictures of the Israeli aggression on Lebanon. These are some of the bombings. You can see they're quite indiscriminate. Like the colony has an issue with life. This is a hospital. This is near university. This is the resulting displacement or ethnic raising or identitarian raising, if you want to be accurate. So people had to leave. We're talking about like 20 to 25% of the population in Lebanon, not just Lebanese, but the whole population in Lebanon, including Palestinians in Lebanon and Syrians in Lebanon. So this is when they had to leave. This is in Saida. This is also in Saida. This is where they had to stay, and some of them are still there, as Mirna was saying. Some of them stay in schools, which means that students cannot go to school, which is another problem that affects almost all of Lebanon in the area that are not being directly targeted. Distributing water. These are pictures of some innocent martyrs in Lebanon. So these are the press. They've attacked the press since day one. The truth is one of the colony's biggest enemies in addition to life and infrastructure. These are also innocent martyrs, more innocent martyrs. This is a Lebanese freedom fighter. Another innocent martyr. This is someone in the army, an army officer, Lebanese army officer, who is known for his stances. These are also two innocent freedom fighters that were martyred by Israel. Another innocent martyr, another innocent martyr, another. This is an innocent Hezbollah leader who was also martyred as well. So this is a map of Palestine, and next to it is written لن نتخلى عن فلسطين. We will never let go of Palestine. We used to have this in Lebanon, like it's an old thing, but recently after the genocide expanded to Lebanon, this has become part of the, let me call it, resistant culture in Lebanon. So this is, for example, the same sentence. Um, um, on a building in the areas targeted. It's saying لن نتخلى عن فلسطين. We will never let go on Palestine. And it says وعلى الشمال ما في رجعة. So you will not go back to northern Palestine, which is a warning that the Lebanese resistance gave over a year ago to Israel, saying that um, um, uh, settlers in Palestine will only be able to go back to northern Palestine when the colony stops its genocide in Gaza. So this is saying, like, this is still our position, even if you're killing us. This is also from a site, the same sentence from a site near an explosion. This is on social media also. And this is in the same area. I think that this is no longer there because it's been bombed since. This is a man that you should know. He got known because Israel told them to evacuate the building because there were rockets in it, and he was interviewed and asked by the press, "What is in the building? Are there rockets?" Like the colony is saying, and he laughed and he said, "Yes, there are rockets." And then he pointed to himself and he said, "I am the rocket," saying like, I'm the bomb. I'm a stud." And then he said, "Of course, there are no rockets. There are civilians. What is there going to be there?" This is the resistance. It's saying we are present, and this is Lebanese resistance fighting to defend themselves. This picture of Lebanese resistance with the Lebanese and Palestinian flag was in response to a letter by the Palestinian resistance thanking the Lebanese for its support of Palestine. I kind of disagree with the concept of support because it accepts the distinction between the two. But yeah, given colonial borders, this is how it's read. But it's not the. I think we should view it in terms of a project against a project. There's a project of settler colonization and a project of decolonization. And this is an artistic rendering of مع المقاومة أكثر من أي وقت مضى. Today more than ever we stand with the resistance. Yeah, that's it. Juliette, do you want to take over?
Yes, thank you so much, Alain and Mirna, for your presentations. So my name is Juliette Samman. I'm also based in Beirut, and I'm going to be facilitating the discussion. So it would be great if you have questions to share them. So either by raising a hand or putting it in the chat, or also if you have, any comments that this is inspiring you to share. I see that some of you already put things in the chat, especially around what Alain shared on the historical boundaries and the politicization of identities. So I don't know if Rina, for example, you shared a personal example. Do you want to expand on this?
I don't think I have more to add than that unless people have questions about it.
Okay. Thank you. So just for those who didn't see in the chat, you shared an example about a relative of yours who is also Jewish, and that you're discussing other relatives of yours who are Baha'i, and talking about the repression from Iran, and your relative, your Jewish relative said, why don't they try to make their own state, illustrating how this idea of politicizing identity is kind of goes to expands with other groups as well. So thank you for sharing this. I don't know if somebody else would want to start with some questions or comments.
Sorry, I was just looking on my phone because somebody I play with tennis with is Lebanese, and his son in Stroud, who's a counselor actually, he studied politics, so he's half Lebanese, and he is gradually educating us. He's sent some amazing interview that Navarra has done with somebody, and also an article, and so I'm just kind of like, I haven't really studied Lebanon before, but I can see that it's really complex. The history is really complex, and the relationship of all the different sort of, I don't know what the word to use really, but groups of people, and how, basically I can see how it is a strategy of divide and rule, which is the old colonial strategy, and hopefully that's not going to happen. And this article, I think, is saying, no, Lebanon isn't going to descend into a civil war. Sorry, that's all I've got to contribute, really.
Liz, the article I just share with you, it tells you a lot about the history of all this region. It is complex, but I think it will clarify a lot of points about what has happened so far from the end of 19th century up to today. I recommend it very much to read this article. Liz.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll find
thank
the
you
other
both.
two that I've got and share as well.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. Alain, do you want to go ahead?
That's me, right?
Yes.
I think, to me, nationalism, identity politics is the most destructive force in the world today. I must say, I don't understand or know that much about Lebanon, but clearly the nationalism of Jews in Israel is the most disgusting and far-reaching example of to what lengths nationalism can drive people. But in the United States, and obviously Trump's nationalism against immigrants and dividing Blacks and Latins and is very important in why he won the election, although Harris does really just the same. But there's also amongst the left in the United States, among much of the left, there's also this idea that nationalism is very important, especially if it's nationalism of the oppressed. They're not going to defend American nationalism, but nationalism by anybody who's colonized, like the Palestinians, or nationalism of any country that's the enemy of the United States, like Iran or Syria, is perfectly justifiable and to be defended. And so a lot of the left ends up defending dictators or fundamentalists or leaders like Hamas, who I would say does not really, or sometimes even Fatah, does not represent the interests of the ordinary Palestinian workers. So to my mind, I'm a member of a group called the Progressive Labor Party, and a lot of this is expounded on the Multiracial Unity blog. The question is to build class unity across countries, within countries, not unity based on nationality or just who may be fighting whom in terms of the rulers of the world at the moment.
Thank you. There is a lot, I think, to unpack in what you said, or interesting things to jump from. I don't know if Alain, you would like to discuss a bit this point about the kind of class unity across border and how this can apply in the context.
I always have something to say about class unity. I agree with Ellen. I think I can tie it with the concept that somebody mentioned. I think it was this, I'm not sure. So someone was saying that it's not going to happen, like the fragmentation of society is not going to happen. I fear that it has already happened. It has been the case, and it is being the case, and it's been normalized so much that we don't notice it. So, for example, in Lebanon, we view each other as tribes. There's something called their areas. So we for example, when I understood that the war was about to expand and was going to become a genocide in Lebanon, I moved to a Christian area because the genocide will affect the other areas. And this is a way of fragmenting us, like even in our brains, and us and them, because something that's tied to our identities, our cultures, our backgrounds, our religions, our sects, our ethnicities, whatever that word means, instead of it being tied, as Ellen was saying, to our interests, including class interests. And this is not just about Lebanon. So, for example, in the US, Sarah McBride was elected, and she's the first transgender lawmaker in the US. And everybody's so glad about this. And of course, it's important for transgender people to have just the other rights as any other citizen. So this is in itself good. But her stances in favor of colonization, her stances in support of the genocide, her stances that do not support the right of workers in the US. What does she have to say, for example, about the environment and how this is affecting the US? What does she have to say about the wages in the US? What does she have to say about who owns the means of production there? What does she have to say about the fact that wealth can be accumulated, which allows very few individuals to control the media, to control, of course, the armament industry, to have the political organization that, well, they're called two parties, but they're really one party, like the Democratic Party and the Republican Party have. So what does she have to say about healthcare? So all of these political aspects are being tossed aside in favor of a focus on identity. And this is very dangerous because now we're talking about Sarah McBride as a transgender lawmaker versus Trump, who wants to curb the rights of transgender people. So there should be a political program in the US that faces Trump's views against these citizens, transgender citizens, but also Trump's and McBride's views against the interests of US citizens and US workers in general. And this is an aspect that's lacking. And we can see the effects on this throughout the world. Like we've seen a few months ago, the identity-based violence in the UK. A few years ago, there was this poll in the US where 45% of US voters said that it's time to split the US in two based on who supports women's rights to abortion and who doesn't. So this concept of we have different identities, so we should split this kind of two-state solution, not a solution at all, but this is how it's portrayed. It's not just an aspect that threatens Palestine or Lebanon, it's really a danger to all societies of the earth. And this is why, as the One Democratic State Initiative, we don't just call on people to stand with Palestine or to stand against the genocide, but really to stand against this unholy trinity of politicizing identity, capitalism, and colonialism, and to dismantle the systems back home, like fight for your own society. And we have a common interest in Palestine, Lebanon, and your society.
Yeah, I agree with you fully, and I think that's happening a lot in the UK with the independent parties, the candidates who left the Labour government and got elected as independent candidates I suppose it's just kind of like it's going to take time, start slow, but you know, that seems to be the way forward so that we get governments that aren't backed financially by wealthy elites, sort of more people-led assemblies. Don't know how it's, you know, that's the hope, isn't it? That's the dream.
Thank you. Aaron, do you want to, I don't know if you have a question or comment, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to both like agree and also, I guess, I complicate some of Ellen's points about nationalism. I generally like agree that like nationalism and any sectarian or identitarian ideology is fundamentally, you know, against like for me, you know, I'm a socialist and I believe in like in socialist like revolution. And that has to be, I think, a global movement. And nationalism, the ideology of nationalism has shown that it can interfere with socialist movements and undermine the goals of working class liberation. However, I also think that sometimes it's worth supporting national liberation movements. Actually, much of the time when opposed to imperialism, when they are opposed to imperialist formations, it's worth supporting national liberation movements because of what they're able to do even beyond like the borders of their supposed nation state. So, like an example of this is like the struggle to liberate Vietnam. It actually benefited American like Vietnamese people's struggle against the United States empire benefited American working class people too. And the most obvious example of that is like I'm an American citizen, right? I live in America. I've never been afraid that I'm going to be drafted into the US military because during Vietnam, the people's struggle in Vietnam actually inspired many Americans who were being drafted into the military, who were getting military training, to the point where there were like real resistance movements within the U.S. military. There was a real fear of a mutiny. There were some small incidents. People know a lot about like fragging and such, but there were some real like organized incidents that became very dangerous to the United States. And because of that, the United States has been afraid ever since Vietnam to get into any kind of war that could require a draft, right? So perhaps there's some issues we can have with any kind of nationalism, but when national liberation movements like clearly are a part of an international struggle, I think we should support them. Of course, like in the 21st century, we are in a unique position that's slightly different than the position that the left was in much of the 20th century, where we have like a very much like globalized working class, whereas in the 20th century there were still places that, you know, still had like feudal, and I suppose there probably are still places in the world that have some elements of feudal economies to this day, but for the most part we have a globalized working class that, you know, we're at the point where I think we can start to talk about like real global liberation movements. But at the same time, I think, you know, when it comes to national liberation forces in the world today, it's still worth critically supporting them when they're fighting against imperialism. Like, for example, against the Zionist entity, you know, national liberation struggles against Zionism are worth supporting, even if we don't necessarily agree 100% with the ideology.
Thank you. That was an interesting perspective. And there is a message from Mirna in the chat that said that in the context of anti-colonial resistance, nationalism tied to the land, like can be defined as tied to the land rather than tied to the identity. I don't know, Mirna, if you want to expand or if this is what you put in the box.
Yeah, in my mind, it gets to the idea of what is indigeneity. And indigeneity is not about the identities of your ancestors or where your ancestors might have once lived. So this kind of gets at the argument that Zionists make that they're indigenous because there were Jews in Palestine thousands of years ago. And it's about continuous symbiotic relationship with the land and the ecosystem. You cannot divorce economics. If you want an economics that benefits everybody, regardless of identity, you cannot divorce that from ecology. And so you can have an idea of a Palestinian nationality or nationalism that is not based on a religion, for example, or on a language or anything that might be used to define ethnicity, but rather based on relationship with cultivating the land of Palestine. And that has been something that the Zionist colonial movement has deliberately been trying to sever that relationship with the land.
Thank you. Thanks. I like your definition. I don't know if somebody wants to react to this, or maybe if Mirna or Alain, you want to also add something. No? Okay. Amal, yes, please go ahead.
Yes, I agree with Rina. I mean, what is it to be a Palestinian or to be a Lebanese? Or for me, it's my origin is Palestinian, but I live in Spain, and now I feel Spanish because it's a place where I feel well as well. I do contribute to this place. So it's loving the land that takes you and taking care of it and cultivating it and living in harmony with everything around you. So it doesn't matter really where you come from. It's how you love the land that you're living on. And sometimes I have just recently discovered the origin of many Jewish in Palestine who have immigrated to Palestine, and they are Cházaros. In Spanish, it's Cházaro. I'm not sure in English how it is called. Cházaros. They come from Ukraine and Poland, so they are not Semitic, and I just don't understand anything they say. They talk about their origins from this land, but they're not from there. They're not from there, and I bet that if they do a DNA test to most of people living in Israel, they're not Semitic. So it doesn't matter. The question is, let's live on this land in harmony with our neighbors, with everyone around us. Let's cultivate the land that gives us food and water. And that's it. Why complicate it? Why do we want to have everything? They want everything. No compromise, nothing 50-50, 100%. It's all for them. And I really am interested about the history of these people, where they come from. Find out about Cházaros. I'm going to put a link about where they come from. And the people never cultivated the land. They're warriors. They've been always warriors. They don't know what is the link with the land. And that's why they're destroying the land. They're destroying the most fertile land on earth, which is called Al-Hilal al-Khasib. It's being destroyed, Lebanon and Palestine. I mean, the land that humankind first landed on from Africa when they crossed as 70,000 years ago, crossed Africa, and they found the most fertile land and turned to be from a hunter into agriculture. Now it's a land that we cannot cultivate. It's a pity. Anyhow, I said what I wanted to say. That's it.
Thank you for sharing this. I see that Fazin, you're reacting in the chat. Do you want to go ahead directly?
So something that I've realized is, like, for instance, especially in the past year, I've become a lot more isolationist. That, you know what, stop, you know, we have problems here. Like in the town I grew up in, 12% of high schoolers are proficient in math, by Illinois standards. And that's disgusting, right? We have spent more money on Israel than our entire, and just in 2024, than our entire Department of Education budget. And it's like, I just wish that we would care about our own problems before anyone else's problems. And I'm not sure if that qualifies as nationalism, but more isolationism. It's like, I wanna curry favor with the working class here. Our working class here needs solidarity, and we need to care about our children and our education and all of this before we can worry about anybody else. I don't know how people feel about that opinion, and this is something that's pretty recent. In the past year, I've become more and more isolationist. Like, we have too many problems here to be worried about Ukraine. And like, is that bad? I don't really know. But I honestly don't care about Ukraine, or it's not that I don't care about Palestine, right? It's like, why are we sending money to Israel to begin with? Like, yes, I understand it's to maintain like this imperial project and everything, but I wish I could get people to understand that it's like, we have issues here that we need to deal with first. And I don't know how other people feel about this.
Look, can I speak? I think it's wealthy. I think it's wealthy elites that want to keep certain trading agreements, certain financial links, that if there is stability in the Middle East and if they will lose their control. And I think that this sort of finance, I'm not an economist, but I think that these financial links have been established for years since colonialism, and now it's kind of like US imperialism. And I think that these, you know, a minority, an elite, control governments and make sure that this situation, you know, continues to exist. But yeah, it's at the expense. I mean, it's the same in the UK. It's at the expense of like you say, schools and housing and, you know, all the things that are important for people's lives, for ordinary people's lives. So yeah, I just think it's very greedy people who have a lot of money. But that's my thinking.
Thanks. Aaron, go ahead.
Yeah. So to respond a little bit to the comments about isolationism, I think I definitely understand that feeling, especially for people who live in the United States, where, you know, we have a lot of people. I mean, most people, I think, according to statistics in the United States, are living like paycheck to paycheck. It's and we have so much money that's flowing out of the country to like military, to wars, to genocides. I think it's quite understandable to have that feeling that we should be spending money here at home. But what I do want to say is, you know, we live in a global world, and we're not going back from that. And it's not, I think, a good tendency if the goal is like liberation of all people, to distinguish, let's say, between a working class person in the United States or a working class person in Lebanon or in India or anywhere in the world, because our interests are all the same. the ruling class of the world, the capitalist class, lives a global lifestyle. And there's a tendency, oftentimes right-wingers use this tendency to say, well, the problems that we face in our economy, in our country, are because of globalism, not because of capitalism. If only our local capitalists managed things, everything would be fine. Of course, local capitalist, petite bourgeois people exploit just as much as they can, right? And that's not really like a solution. What I would say is I think we need like a global, and I think ODSI is part of this, right? We're bringing together people from all over the world to support this. We need a global working class movement that says, you know, we don't want just internationalism for the rich. We want internationalism for everyone, right? We want a global society that serves everyone. We want trade agreements that serve the working classes, you know, of all countries, and not capitalist elites. And I do think that requires an internationalist framework. And the fact is, like, when you support struggles abroad, it does actually make a difference in your local community as well, even if it's not always obvious that that's the case. So opposing like American imperialism is absolutely like an international project, not just like a local project.
Thank you. Thank you. And there is a comment in the chat from Janetian who says, where will be the Palestinians? And I would add also, and the Lebanese in this global world, which I think is also like interesting to have this in mind in this discussion. I see Simon and Alain, you have your hand raised. So maybe Simon first and then Alain.
Okay, yeah. So to Farzine and Aaron's points both, I wanted to follow up like kind of with a general discussion question. Regarding particularly Farzine's comment about isolationism. And I mean, kind of for me, reminded me of like in the like early to mid 20th century when socialism had taken root in Russia and you had the formation of the SSRs and you had like a, you know, a socialist communist world order that had formed in the eastern part of the world in Europe. There's a debate between like internet workers, international socialism, right, versus socialism in one state, which was kind of developed under Stalin. And I mean, the idea was like to consolidate socialism within a single SSR, and then that would be a better foundation through which to spread socialism. But, you know, that had a lot of, you know, I don't know, it wasn't in a vacuum. It wasn't just Stalin and the particular type of, you know, command and control type of government that he set up, but it was also, it was a myriad of factors that kind of, you know, had a lot of terrible consequences for a lot of people through trying to implement that. And I mean, I guess the ideal, or my ideal in some ways, to Aaron's point also, I think you echoed this, is that hopefully there's like an international workers' socialism that could be achieved. And I think a lot of ODSI is about making the point that the politicization of identity and the maintenance of capitalism are intertwined and reinforce each other. And so I wanted to pose to put the discussion forward about like, how do you balance the two prerogatives of like firming up certain depoliticization of identity goals within a single state or entity, or and versus the broader prerogative of transcending states and being about people in fostering a sense of global solidarity across all workers.
Thank you. I think that's a very great topic to go ahead. I'm sure Alain is very happy with that. I know you had your hand raised before, so Alain, maybe you want to start with the rest and then continue on this.
Yes. So Yani, I agree with what Simon and others were saying, and with everything Rina is saying on the chat. So regarding the question, Faizin's question about isolationism and Jane's question about like, what do Palestinians and Lebanese care about this global thing right now? So when considering isolationism, we're basically asking a question like, should states interfere outside their societies or not? First of all, I think that if there's anything the past year has taught us, it's that there is a global colonial project. So when we're talking about the colonies genocide in Palestine and now Lebanon, we're not just talking about a settler entity in Palestine and about an occupation army in Palestine. We're talking about Lockheed in the US that is selling weapons. We're talking about Swiss investment banks that are funding all kinds of such enterprises and corporations. We're talking about the algorithms of Meta. We're talking about Elon Musk. We're talking about European interior ministries and municipalities that are making decisions about what to allow and what not to allow in terms of protests for Palestine. We're talking about Arab leaders that, talk about Palestinian rights, but side with the existence of the colony. We're talking about Egypt that was participating with Israel in besieging and starving Gaza. So this is one global project. So you are affected by this project no matter where you live. So you want to interfere or not, but this is, first, let's start from the acknowledgement that this is a global project. My second idea would be a comment that it's interesting that proponents of non-interference often interfere. So a lot of people like Trump talked about non-interference, but he did interfere by making some kinds of proposal for a two-state so-called solution in Palestine. So he does have an outlook. He made decisions regarding places that are tens of thousands of kilometers away from the US. Proponents of non-interference also interfere in other ways. So, for example, when they talk about a free economy, which is basically the freedom of the capitalists to do whatever they want, this includes the freedom of investment companies to invest tens of billions of dollars in armament companies that they call the defense industry, which is funny because I don't know when's the last time US weapons were used in the US to actually defend it from an invasion, probably more than 200 years ago. So they are interfering in this way. They are interfering, for example, when they fund USAID to distribute aid in Lebanon. So this is like this contradiction of capitalist neoliberalism where the US state says we should not fund things like education in the US because, the state should limit its role. But then it funds USAID to do similar things in Lebanon instead of the Lebanese state. So what exactly do you believe? Like, do you think states should interfere or not? So basically, non-interference is a kind of interference. And this brings me to my third point, that interference in itself is not a good or a bad thing. It's interfering is an act. I can interfere to help you out and I can interfere to beat you up. So interference in itself is not good or bad. It's a tool in the hand of a political program, and this political program can be a good or a bad, a helpful or unhelpful political program. So instead of isms like I support isolationism or I don't support isolationism, what I think we should do is recognize facts on the ground, like not abstract ideology. There is a global capitalist, identitarian, colonial political project, and what we need is its antithesis, which is a decolonial political project. And because the colonial project is global, the resistance must be global. And this is why, as the ODS Initiative, we are so interested. Like, this is why we are having this discussion in English with people who are not in Lebanon or Palestine, because we really want to convey this idea of urgency and importance of having a decolonial political project in all societies in the world. So you can join the ODSI, you can create similar political organizations in your world, but in your area of the world, but we need to organize efforts.
Thank you, Alain, for this. We can take still a few more questions for those who can stay before we have closing words. So I don't know, Farah.
Yes, it's interesting you, Alain, the way you've posed the task, if you like, which is global decolonization, but the ODS, the one democratic state, as people might understand it, and as I understand it, is about Israel. It's just the state, the Zionist ideology, the project, and the focus of the decolonization needs to be brought. Needs to. Yes, it may have a global context and drive. The drivers may be global, definitely are global colonization, but we need to keep the focus, I think, on the task, which is to bring the focus on the one democratic state, or decolonization of the Zionist project. I don't know if yeah, that's all I want to say.
Thank you. I will just jump in quickly and then let Alain or Mirna go ahead if they want to add something. From my perspective, I'm speaking because I worked a lot on decolonial projects and decolonization in general. So there is settler colonialism and there is coloniality in general. And my perspective is that, of course, both are related. But globally, when we speak about decolonizing ourselves globally, that doesn't mean only settler colonialism. And then the dismantlement of a Zionist project and of what's happening in Palestine and Lebanon is part of a global decolonial project, like depoliticizing identity is part of a global decolonial project. So both are not unrelated, and we can focus on ODS while being part of a global decolonial project, if that makes sense.
Okay.
I don't know if Alain, you want to correct me or add something.
No, I have nothing to correct. I was looking for a mistake, but I couldn't find any.
Okay, any other questions? I know that there was a lot of very interesting discussions going on the chat, especially around the ideas of identity and indigeneity. So that's really great. If you didn't have a chance to read, I really encourage you to read them. And then if there is no other comment or question, maybe Mirna or Alain, you want to say a final word, message to other participants, what they can do. Alain, you already started on it, but any other calls for action?
يعني, I think my main call to action would be the thing I said, like يعني, either become more active with the ODSI or join a similar movement in your country. I think that, as you said, Juliette, it's like really a personal choice. Like Adiba, if you think that you want, or if you feel that you want to focus on Palestine, then that's great. So, for example, Mirna and I, يعني, we're both in Lebanon. She's of Palestinian origin, I'm not, but she is focusing on the party that she's in, which is a Lebanese political party, and she does some work for the initiative. And I do the other thing around. Like, I focus on the initiative and I do some work for the party. So I think it's really a personal decision. My main suggestion would be, I think, the following. If you want to focus on Palestine, then dedicate, say, an hour a week, but like week in, week out for the initiative, because what we need is regular work, even if it's small but regular. Like occasional bursts of work don't really help. They do help, but it's not the same. I would much rather have someone dedicated like half an hour a week, week in, week out, than someone delivering 10 hours of work once a month. So this is one idea. And my second idea would be, if you're going to join a local political movement, then it really must be a revolutionary political movement. So not one that is trying to just like improve things, but one that is trying to radically change things. And there's a concept there. I won't go too much into it now because like it's really off topic. But political systems fundamentally change in times of crisis. Like when a crisis strikes, this is when there is an opportunity for radical change. If there is an organized political movement with a political vision for that change, like the alternative needs to be ready. Otherwise, people will just complain about the problems, but not side behind the solution because there is no solution, just a problem to complain about. I wrote an article about this actually right after the elections, where the candidate that supports colonization lost and the candidate that supports colonization won. So I will send the link on the chat.
I wasn't mute all the time. I would like just to say that I think that international relations should be written again. They're sick. They're becoming sick. And I think that there's food for everybody on this earth. No need to fight. It's the redistribution of the wealth that is need to be rethought again. Thank you for joining.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone. And just quickly, because there was a question in the chat, you can save the chat also on your computer by clicking on the three dots next to at the top, if you want to read it later. And yeah, thank you, everyone. It was very interesting conversation. I don't think I have anything to add. Yeah, I guess you received the information from the from ODSI. If not, you can always subscribe to the newsletter and have the information of the future webinars, etc. So thanks for joining. And if you have further questions later on, you can reach out to us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye-bye.